Challenging week last week. Really nice to look forward to getting back to Geodis Park. Group's in good shape. Some good work this week. Weather's held out for us, and we've been able to get some fulfilling structural work in towards what will be, I think, a very talented and an awkward Montreal team. There's some real quality in their group that I think, just rolls over from last year, and with the added addition of a new coach, they look in a spirited position, and I do think that their results are a long way off of maybe what they should have got out of the last two games. So a big challenge in front of us and a good week to prepare for it.
Thank you, Coach. We'll go to the Zoom and start with Tim Sullivan. Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, Gary, when you look at the results that Montreal has had so far, what is it about them that makes you think, hey, maybe these guys are a little bit better than, having lost their first two games?
Well, number one, they've had opportunities at very good times in the game, and they've not capitalised on that. They got off to, I think, a very good start against Miami. They had two really good chances before Miami got themselves into a better position. And the same can be said for the Austin game. Austin actually, in fairness, had two nice opportunities before Montreal then got themselves in a better spot and started to look a little bit more creative. But I think the one thing that shines through in both of the games, they have put an awful lot in to being creative, to taking chances going forward, committing bodies going forward in two difficult away games for them. So they've created opportunities, but they've also given opportunities away. And unfortunately for them, on both occasions, the opposing teams have taken advantage and they haven't.
Next we'll go to Ben Wright and then Claudio Villalobos. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, Gary, we obviously saw Anibal get injured and miss out last week. Randall also missed out. Can you just give an update on those two and maybe the overall health of your group?
Yeah, both of those guys will be out, unfortunately, this weekend. Anibal is getting his first work on field physically after the injury against New York City. And Randall pulled out at the very end of last week with some tightness in his hamstring, and unfortunately he won't be available for this weekend either. Both cases are in a much better position than we maybe thought with the early diagnosis. So I'm very hopeful that next week we'll see both of those guys in a much better position.
We'll go to Claudio and then Tim. Go ahead, Claudio.
Gary, even though every season is different, every game is different, I want to bring back that experience with many months within the last season when we had the Sporting Kansas City come into the Geodis Park, and for all intended purposes, most people, I don't know about you, probably you're not the one of them, but thought that it was going to be a walk in the park for Nashville to beat a team that was doing so bad at that point, and then actually it went all the way different. How do you prevent a team like Nashville to actually repeat anything if it's going to repeat? I hope not, for sure. The performance against a team that is probably having trouble in the season.
Well, I think the first thing is, Claudio, we're only 2 games in. This is their 3rd away game on the spin, and I looked at their schedule. I think they played 5 out of the first 6 away. So it's enormously challenging for them. We experienced something, slightly more difficult than that last year. So we understand the mindset that these groups can get in. It's not easy. But the 2-game sample size, I don't think is anywhere near enough to start to see where teams are going to settle into in the league. Of course, you want to get off to a good start and add points, but they'll also be looking at their schedule and the challenging aspects of it. So I don't think in any way, shape or form we can take much out of the results so far. Secondly, it's a really good point that you make. This league, as we're always seeing, is so challenging. Home, away, the fine lines between victory and defeat, you know, the opportunities that are there within a game that you have to take or you fall foul of. And I don't think it'll be any different at the weekend. What I do think we'll see is a very different game to the one we ran into last week. We're looking at polar opposites in the way that both teams apply themselves and the philosophies of the groups. I do think that Montreal, in the game against Austin, showed more tendency to go and press the ball and threaten the ball, which is a little bit more maybe like we saw from DC, from the new coach. But they still maintain and look like that possession-oriented team that we saw from last year. So you've got a nice couple of qualities there. They're getting on the front foot, and when they're in possession, they're difficult to get the ball off of. So it's not going to be an easy game, but a very different one to last week for us.
Thank you, Coach. We'll go back to Tim Sullivan. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of that topic there. Obviously, New York City wants the ball as much as anybody. Red Bulls probably want it as little as anybody. When you have this three-game sequence early in the season where you're playing such radically different styles week to week, how much do you kind of have to alter what you guys are doing to game plan for the specific opponent versus how much are you kind of saying, hey, we are going to be what we are and we kind of have to make them adapt to us too?
Yeah, very much so. You know, we performed very, very well in the opening game. And of course, we want to impress our style. We are at home. We'd love to get off to the sort of start that we did against New York City. So that mindset and application is very much a priority in how we've planned and prepared. I think the most important factors to understand here, though, is that the way that Montreal play and the shape of their group is different to either of the two teams that we've run into so far. And the information that I've given the guys has just allowed them, hopefully, to be prepared and understand that there may be periods in the game that Montreal take a little bit of control because of their shape, to not get frustrated. But, of course, being in such an aggressive position at home, we certainly want to try and make the most of that. So, you know, a big part of this week has been about what we can achieve, what we are capable of, and of course trying to reinforce a very bright start.
Go ahead, Claudio.
Gary, I'm sure that because you told us before anyway about the great preseason that Hannibal and Leal had, that you were counting with them, and you did in the first game, and they played very nicely for the team. How much has the preparation been a headache for you, if it has been, when you know that you can account for it, not even to as substitutes for the next few games?
Well, any time you're missing experienced players, and to your point, very effective players, it's always a loss. There are big decisions to make when everyone's fit, but what it does do is keep a real high level of competition around the group. And it, of course, gives me options, whether that's to start the game or off the bench. It's been very disappointing to see both of those guys. And of course, you know, we've really not seen anything of Nick Dupay, who sadly had surgery on Friday to an Achilles problem, which is a completely different story with regards to recruitment of that player and what went on in that deal, which I think player and club are very disappointed about. But the simple fact is, with Annabelle and Randall, we lose options, we lose ability, and we lose valuable experience in big games. So, as I said earlier on, the hope is that they won't be out for too long. Neither of the injuries, as I said, were as problematic as we first thought. So that window of time, I'm hoping, will be greatly reduced. It gives other people opportunities, that is for sure, but it's a big miss. There's no two ways about it.
We'll wrap up today's session with Coach Smith, with Tim Sullivan, and then Ben Wright. Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, Gary, you alluded to this a little bit ago, that odd backline that Montreal plays with. What sort of difficulties does that present for you guys, both in the way you want to defend against them and in the ways that you can attack them as you move into that final third?
Well, it's a completely different shape. You know, we've played it ourselves. They played against Miami in more of a stereotypically 3-5-2, and then last weekend played in a shape that we've seen much more from this Montreal group in a 3-4-3. They occupy spaces and areas on the field that are alternate and different to the way that we play. So there's got to be some understanding and some decent focus in transition. But ultimately, the game will boil down to whatever team can impose their way. Our shape causes them problems, and their shape will cause will cause them problems. So it will be difficult for them if we can get our main players on the ball, and likewise we've got to be careful when they are in possession and in control. But I think we've got one or two adaptable players that can offer up a little bit of a different viewpoint and maybe look when we're trying to negate what they can do.
Dan, obviously Montreal is a club that you're pretty familiar with, but at this stage, basically, everybody that you played with there is gone. What sort of, I guess, emotional implications are there for a club that you played for, but has kind of experienced complete turnover since then?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's even before I got there, it was a club that had a lot of turnover in a lot of different facets. But quite honestly, I think after year 3, I've gotten through the full emotional range of playing them again. But that being said, it's always interesting to play, see some familiar faces, even though it's not a full team and staff and whatever there may be left. But it's always interesting. I think no matter what, over the years, the club has found a way to be sporadically very difficult to play against. And if you look at how they were lined up last year, they had a very successful year, and they had a lot of continuity in coaching and players, and that seemed to work well for them. So they obviously represent a little bit of a different beast this year, but a team that always is able to get results in places that people might count them out otherwise. Next,
we'll go to Claudio Villalobos and then Ben Wright. Go ahead, Claudio.
Dan, tell us a little bit about that nice relationship that you've developed rather quickly, I might say, with Jacob and the left wing of the team that is looking so good so early this season.
Yeah, I think Jacob's been a guy that, obviously we identified as fitting our system quite well, and I think he's, fit in seamlessly. At the end of last year, he had some exciting moments, but it's been good to start, a full campaign with him through the beginning of preseason and to get him used to how we operate and to finer tune some of the details of his game, and especially mine, to help put him in positions where he's incredibly hard to defend, which we've seen. So whether that's using his pace in behind or using his positional play, I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities for myself and for him to create offensive momentum down our side of the field. And hopefully we're looking forward to doing that a little bit more consistently. But I think we have the luxury of focusing on what we're able to accomplish on our side of the field when you have so much danger through the middle with Hani and Teal and CJ. And having Fafa and Randall on the other side, I think, makes us a pretty well-balanced attack. So we have guys that are able to do well in 1v1 situations. And as a supporting player to those guys up front, it's just it's really important to make sure you know when to pick your spots to get up and help them and when to leave them alone and let them do their thing. So it's always a thing we're trying to find the right balance for, and each game represents a different challenge, but it's something I've thoroughly enjoyed, and he's a great guy to work with.
Thank you, Dan. Next we'll go to Ben and then Tim Sullivan. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, Dan. And first of all, just a lot to live up to there. What's your name? But in serious note, we talked a lot last year about home form and kind of the issues at Geodis Park. You guys got off to a really good start against NYCFC. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on last year and how you guys are setting up to kind of not just avoid those issues, but take a big step forward here this season at home.
Sure. I think there was a unique challenge in opening up a new venue, first and foremost. I think any team that's been able to do that has, you know, not struggled so much maybe as we had to a certain degree, but tried to, you know, get over that hump of being in a new space and trying to establish a style of play and a new set of surroundings. But I think more than anything, having 8 games on the road to open up an MLS campaign is a daunting task. And I remember my years in Toronto, we had stadium renovations 2 years in a row. I think it was 15 and 16, where we started, I think it was 10 games and then 8 games on the road. And through that experience, you know, we kind of understood that there's a certain way to attack those opening slate of away games. And the most difficult thing to do is to not go into, I don't want to call it a shell, but a more pragmatic approach that kind of serves us well in the short term, and then proves a little bit difficult to let the reins off of, you know, the more aggressive style that you want to see more consistently at home. So I think that's a lot of what we saw last year. We have it in us. We have that next gear that we can hit, but having to withstand a schedule that was as daunting as it was away from home and to be so successful at doing it, we're trying to, you know, keep the good things and the good momentum that we had in certain aspects of our game, but fold in the aggressive nature that we wanted to see more consistently at home. And I think that took some adjusting to, and I think that's clear in the results and how things transpired last year. But having an even schedule to start this year, and I think that does us the world of good. And I think having the opening game be at home, a lot of energy, to say the least, surrounding that game. I think it was going to be pretty hard for us to come out and not get points, especially 3 points in a game with so much excitement surrounding it with the new jerseys and everything. It was just something that we've really focused on setting right and getting off on the right foot so early this year, and we've had the opportunity to do so. So I think that's a lot of words just to say we're able to focus on ourselves and what we're able to accomplish at home, because we have opportunities to do so in quick succession where we were starved of that maybe a little bit last year. So it's something we're very grateful for finally, and to have last year under our belt is great, but we're looking to kick things up a notch for sure, at home especially.
Thank you, Dan. We'll wrap up the session today with Tim Sullivan. Go ahead, Tim.
Dan, when you look at a Montreal team that almost exclusively operates out of an odd back line, as one of the guys who kind of provides the width on the team, what sort of different challenges does that provide to you? And obviously you guys have played a little bit of it yourselves. What sort of opportunities are you thinking, oh, they'll be able to do, you know, this thing that we need to make sure that we are able to cut out as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it's the difficulty in this game to try to assume what we think they're going to line up as, because there's been many times where we've prepped for a formation, they've shown up in something different relative to who they have available and how their last result went, whatever it may be. But if they do line up in that back five, I think they are not struggling, but trying to find the right combination of players in certain spots. And as we know, when we switch to that formation or any formation, we're trying to put guys in the right spots to get the best out of them in their respective games. So we assume that they'll do that to some degree, and that might make it look a little untraditional or a little bit, you know, a little bit different than how we may line up. And it's just about, more than anything, focusing on ourselves and knowing that when we're in good form, we pose them equally problematic situations as they would pose us in their setup. So, you know, we're certainly wary of how they'll line up and the glaring mismatches or potential advantages that they may have or seek to have in that matchup. Otherwise, we're just focused on what we're able to do, and we've been doing to a relatively high degree throughout preseason and the first 2 matches. So we expect it'll look a lot different to last week against Red Bull, in a place that's hard to play, and a team that plays a totally distinct and different style. But it'll be a good test for us and something we're looking forward to.